All right, so like I said, today we're going to do day two. This is going to focus specifically on how to analyze your data using some advanced operators. And then once we play with some of those advanced operators and I show you some good use cases for these advanced operators, we're going to talk about getting that data into dashboards. So the mechanics of actually creating dashboards is very easy, as you will find out, as well as creating alerts. And again, the mechanics for creating alerts are incredibly easy. What is more interesting is how to create what we call meaningful alerts, alerts that are not just noise, but you actually want to do something with them. So with that short agenda, what I thought I would start with is since we're going to look at how to use these advanced operators, how to create dashboards, how to alerts, I'm going to show you a demo. This demo in particular shows you how to use these three things, how to use your alerts, your dashboards, and your advanced operators. I'm going to show you some features that will be out in about a month's time. They're not out yet, but I think you're going to find them very, very useful. And you're going to start understanding how to use logs, which most of you that's the reason why you're using Sumo Logic, but also how to start using metrics, which is a feature that we released recently, and how you can start using these too. All right. Again, questions are more than welcome, so feel free to just shoot your questions as we go through this, and I'll help you out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a demo. In this case, we have this company called Travel Logic. It's our fake Sumo Logic travel company, and Travel Logic, as you guys can imagine, they allow you to book flights, they allow you to book hotels, they allow you to book cars as you're traveling. And then once you add those things to your card, you have the ability to enter your card number, your name, email address, and pay for this. So TravelLogic, the ops team at TravelLogic, is using Sumo Logic to track everything that is happening in their environments. So one of the things that can happen for them, actually, before I do that, let me just set the stage. What I'm going to be showing you on this demo, and you notice that this demo is called Unified Logs and Metrics. I'm essentially going to show you how to use your metrics to identify what's going on, and then how to use your logs to identify why that is going on. So the first thing is you're going to receive an alert as a user of the system. You're going to get an alert that is going to notify you of a critical event. In our case, we're going to use a Slack channel alert, and I'm going to be later showing you how to set these up. But I want to show you from a user perspective how you can receive these alerts, and then that alert is going to point us to a dashboard that is made up of metrics. And the interesting thing here is that we're going to see the metrics are going to be able to identify the what is going on in my environment, meaning the symptoms, the things that you see that are happening in your environment. But then we are going to overlay the relevant logs to those metrics. So once we look at the metrics themselves, we're going to dive into the logs and really help identify the why. Why are some of these things happening? So let me walk you through this scenario, these 3 steps. Again, feel free to stop me as I go through this. I'm going to make sure that I point out what are the features that are not out just yet, but it will take, I think it's a couple of weeks away. We're hoping to have it out by the new year. All right, so with that said, here is my website, TravelLogic, and if I am the ops person for this tool, perhaps I have a perhaps I have a Slack channel. In this case, I have my travel app channel, and I just got this alert, and the alert is telling me some information. It's saying, oh, listen, you have a spike in your gateway response. There's an outlier. It shows me a little bit of information. By the way, this alert here is configurable, and I'll later on show you how you can configure this kind of stuff. But you notice it's sending me a link to the results themselves, which I could click and go look at the results of this alert. Or as it's shown here, it's also sending me a link to a dashboard itself, meaning, by the way, this alert refers to this particular dashboard. So I could click on this and it'll take me to the dashboard. Similarly, I could have that dashboard just displaying, I think I have it open here. I could have that dashboard just displaying in my operations center. So in this case, this is the dashboard that is referring to. If I had this set up in my operations center, I could be displaying this dashboard and I can see a lot of reds, and right off the bat be aware that something is going on as well. So a couple of different ways to get alerted. One, have this dashboard in your operations center, but we're not paid to look at dashboards. So the better scenario is let's set up some alerts, and I'll show you how to do it this later on. Set up some alerts to trigger some sort of notification. All right. So the alert sends me over to this dashboard, and you notice alerts are automatically delivered to Travel Ops channel on Slack. So we even put a little bit more information here in the dashboard so people are aware. And before I dive into the demo itself, let me just talk a little bit about this dashboard. So what you're seeing here is an overview, an operational overview that I've pulled data from multiple sources. So, for example, I have a VPC network in my sitting on AWS. So I've got some VPC network rejects information in here. I also have an ELB, an elastic load balancer. So I'm looking at the response times I have in here. And I'm keeping an eye on my database issues, whether this is AWS RDS or it's my own database that is sitting out there. I'm keeping an eye on all the different things that are happening with my database. So my point here is to show you that you can aggregate into one dashboard data from multiple sources that you can keep an eye on all those different things. I have my deployed versions. I have and so this is my infrastructure, right? My VPC, ELB database. Here's some 500 errors. These are all part of my infrastructure, but I can also keep an eye on my custom applications. So in our case, we keep an eye on the product services. We keep an eye on the checkouts. So checkouts mean, I'm going to go back to that UI to show you, as people are trying to check out here and pay. Clearly, if they're not able to pay for some reason or other, that's a terrible thing because they're trying to give me money and I can't take their money. So I have a node that manages this code here, and it's clear from my dashboard that I'm having some errors with that checkout service, which is not a good thing. People trying to give me money and I can't take it. So the way that I've configured this dashboard is if I click on some of these panels, they're going to take me to another dashboard that is giving me a little more information about it. So I just clicked on that checkout panel that I had there, and what it did is it took me to this other detail panel showing me a little bit more information about the services that I have for my TravelLogic environment. So here it is. If you notice the top left-hand side, these are all my bookings. And if you look at that green line or that green area there, this is giving me a sum of all my successes. So every time that someone is able to successfully book, I get a count in here, and I can sum them up. Broken, I think this is over time, so this might be broken like on a per minute basis. But also over here, I am having some of the errors that I was looking at. This orange line, as you see there on that pop-up, is showing me the sum of all my fails. So at some point, I started having quite a bit of fails. My successes dropped and my fails increased. So clearly, something is going on. So you're noticing how I'm using metrics to identify the what. What are the symptoms that I'm seeing? What's going on in my environment? I'm going to show you a little bit of all these other ones here as well, so you can get a good sense. But you start seeing how I have some metric dashboards. Here I have a logs panel right under my metrics panel. This one is showing me the errors for the last 7 days, and I can see those errors. I can see also a spike here in the blues, which is showing me a few of the errors as well. My gateway latency, which is probably why I got that alert, the one that I had set up, it's showing me that there was a spike, and I have some outliers. So these little pink triangles here are outliers showing me that something is going on in terms of the latency, the average latency for my gateway. Also up here, well, let me just show you here, down here at the bottom, I can clearly see that there are some errors popping up. So I have a couple of nodes, and I can see that there's a couple of nodes in here. In particular, if you look at that pop-up, it's showing me that my .travel checkout node is having some issues. So I'm already starting to get a good idea that my travel checkout node of my app is having a few issues. The other ones don't seem to be pointing too many. So look at travel products; it's not having issues. There's actually a node on travel checkout that is not having some issues. So it's a particular type of my travel checkouts nodes that are having some issue. But the one that I wanted to dive in a little bit was this one here at the top. In addition to having some issues with my bookings, I can see that around the same time, look, this looks like around 9:40. It started around 9:40 and then went on to like around 10:10. I can see that like around that same time, I started having some spikes here. Look at this area that is spiking, and I can see that my CPU total was pretty high. My average CPU total was pretty high. Again, look, it says that the node is a travel checkout node. So clearly something is going on with that travel checkout node. My CPU total is spiking. This dashboard in particular is showing me CPU and total memory. So let me do this. I can even zoom in a little more to look at that particular data in there if I wanted to. But more interesting, I'm just going to dive in and start looking at what's happening in there. So I'm going to dive into that particular dashboard. What it's going to do, similar to log panels, it's just going to open the query itself and I can start seeing it. So for those of you who haven't played with metrics that much, this is all available now. It's available. You can start playing with it. You can start bringing your metrics, whether it's your host metrics or whether it is your AWS metrics. You can start bringing them into Sumo Logic. But anyway, what I'm seeing here is that I have my CPU and total memory. So this dotted line seems to be showing me my memory, and these solid lines are showing me my CPU. Cool thing here is that I could turn some of these on and off. For example, I can turn off and just show the CPU and turn off the memory so that I can clean up my views in here if I want to as well. Let me make this just a little smaller so I can show you everything. Okay, so what I'm seeing is definitely a spike that happened in my CPU. It seems to be happening in, since I did an average by node, I can tell that it's happening in some of my travel nodes. Now, what I'm going to show you right now is this is the part that is coming out in a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks time. I'm going to show you how I can overlay my logs on top of my metrics, right? So clearly something is going on. What I want to do is I want to keep an eye on my logs that I don't know exactly which checkout node it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, just give me everything that has travel checkout, and let's take a peek at that. So with these logs, what's happening right now is it's still running the same query. And up here at the top, it's showing me the logs that it captured for that particular time period. Clearly, since I just pulled all the logs, it's just showing me everything. But probably more interesting would be, what if I just look for those logs that have the word error, or maybe even the word error and the word exception? I'm going to run that, and now I can start seeing that. That some of these logs are starting to show errors a little more, and they're overlaid with my dashboard in here. For some reason, my dashboard's looking a little funky, and I think it's because of the size of my screen. But what you're seeing is it's starting to overlay and show me where these errors are happening. And remember that spike that I was having? Well, errors seem to be showing a little more dense in that area as well. So I could do a couple of things. If I just click, by the way, the darkness of that orange triangle means that there are more errors happening in there. So in this particular area, maybe not that many errors. In here, I wasn't having errors, and all of a sudden I started getting some errors. So if I click on any of those, it's going to show me the log messages for that particular area. It's a little hard to go through so many errors. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to use the easy button that's available in our product. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a shift click. And that shift click, it's going to take me to that UI that we're already familiar with. Let me make it a little bit bigger in case this is too small for you. All right, so now that I'm in this UI, which we've seen before, I'm saying, okay, give me everything for source category, something or other, travel checkout, looking for these particular words. I'm going to use this easy button called LogReduce. What LogReduce does is it's going to look for all the file. It's going to look through all my messages. As a matter of fact, let me do this. It's very possible that the culprit for my issues does not have the word error or exception is in it. It's probably something that happened that then is causing all these errors. So let me just do a search first. Maybe let's choose the last 60 minutes. Let's just do a search for everything that has to do with travel checkout for the last 60 minutes, since I know that spans the time where something was going on in my environment, right? So now I ran this query. it's massive, a lot of data. As a matter of fact, it's even pausing. It's saying, well, you have more than 100,000 messages. Look, this is pages and pages of data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this LogReduce button, and what it's happening right now in the background is it's taking all the messages that came back from this query, and it's starting to categorize those messages into what we call a signature. So you notice here the word signature. What it's saying is, I've gone through all these messages and I've found about 10,000 messages, as you see here, that all have this same structure or the same signature. They all seem the same. Of course, their date is different, and perhaps their line number is going to be different, and their gateway credit, charging credit via gateway is different. So anything that shows here as an asterisk is a variable in that signature, but it's telling me it's a lot of the stuff here is very similar to each other. So I'm just going to put them together into a signature itself. So notice it went from I think it was like 4,300 pages, and it's distilling it down to like 3, 4, 5 pages. So something a lot easier to be able to eyeball. And what we're doing here, essentially, is we're trying to find that needle in the haystack when we really don't know what that needle looks like. We don't know what someone has done in the system. We don't know what's happened to start causing all those errors in my travel checkout. So this LogReduce is essentially helping me to distill that kind of stuff. So again, it's still going. It was a lot of data. If you notice, it's now going through about 400,000 messages. I should have probably chosen a period smaller just to demo, but that's okay. It's probably going to pull about 500,000 records, and it's going to clump them into this signature as you see here. So let me give it just a second for it to complete. But if you start scrolling down, you start seeing how messages get put together, and I can even start looking through those messages. So here's one in particular. It says checkout.process_cart. An error occurred, access denied. So in this case, it looks like I have a lot of errors that are saying access denied. So some sort of error is going on where I don't have particular access. This next line in here is showing me some checkout charge issues, some SSL error. Okay, so this is probably telling me a little more. In this particular case, it looks like I was having a certificate issue of some sort. So you notice it completed. It came back with only 4 pages. So it looked through almost 750,000 messages, and it came back and said, okay, I've distilled all those messages into signatures. You happen to have one here, this particular signature that is showing more than 100,000 times. So I didn't have to go through 100,000 messages. I can easily look here and say, okay, this one gets repeated, this one gets repeated, this one gets repeated. So that's not, it's kind of getting rid of all that noise. Now I see these 2 messages that I was looking at before. One of them is telling me that there's a certificate that failed. So clearly something is going on with my certificate, and that's probably one of the culprits of why people cannot check out. What I don't know yet is why are we failing with these certificates? So I'm going to cut to the answer just to keep this a little shorter. I'm going to sort by relevance. And in this particular case, if you notice, what is popping up in here is that here's that service checkout. And I can see that someone deployed development code into my production environment. Right. So again, this is something that would have been really, really, really hard to figure out. And how do you go about looking for this in your logs? But what I just did is I used that easy button called LogReduce that allows me to grab all these signatures, combine them, and pull out those things that are happening that are a little more relevant, or that only happen a few times, because in this case it's a demo, so it repeats over time. But in reality, you would only find one of these, right? That one of these versions got deployed, and that's how I can use this LogReduce. I can use the metrics and to kind of get to this scenario. Any questions from the audience so far? No? All right. So what you saw me do is I walked you from getting an alert or going to a dashboard that I can see on the UI, jumping into metrics to identify what's going on, what are the symptoms that I'm seeing, and then pulling up the relevant logs that help me identify why something is happening. So again, the link between the what and the relevant logs is what's coming out in a couple weeks time that you'll be able to start using on your end. All right. With that said, what I'm going to do now, let me quit Slack so I don't get messages from coworkers that are trying to get a hold of me, so we don't get any interruptions. What I'm going to do today then is, after showing you that demo and giving you that idea of how you can use it or what you want to get at the end, let me show you exactly what we talked about. First is how to use some of these advanced operators, how to use some of those advanced operators to build some of those dashboards that you just saw that I used, and then how to build those alerts to monitor my data as I'm going through this. All right, great. So with that in mind, I'm going to go here. This is the same instance we were using yesterday. If you remember, I was running very simple queries like source category equals Apache Access. I can run that. I can see data for the last 15 minutes. Remember that we could do some parsing by highlighting things here and going to parse, or using parse regex, or maybe more importantly, I could use field extraction rules. Yesterday you saw how I had an Apache Access field extraction rule, and the benefits of having rules like that is that you have a field browser with all the fields that you care for in there. So a lot of this data is already parsed for me, and I can start using it. All right, enough for the review. Let's start going through here, and you notice how I've opened quite a few tabs that go 1 through 6 with a few more at the end. I'm going to be showing you, since I cannot show you all our operators, I thought I'm going to show you the most important ones, or the ones that you're going to be using on a regular basis. So the first one that I'm going to pull up is always a winner. People like to know how these maps were created. They find them quite visually pleasing, and it always it's good for management as well to pull up a little map and show them that stuff. So let me show you how this one was built. Pretty straightforward. Oh, sorry about that. Let me just close that. The operator that we really want to use is this one called the lookup operator. And if I go into help and just show you that lookup operator, I can give you an idea of how I put that together. Lookup. So just let me look up for that operator here just to show you. And you notice that I point you to documentation quite a bit. It's all in there. So of course I can't go through all of it, but I'm going to try to point you to the right location. So here's the syntax itself. Essentially, what I did is I grabbed this from here. Of course, there's a few other fields that I didn't grab. I just looked for latitude and longitude. If you notice back in here, I just pull latitude and longitude. But let's just grab all of them. I'm going to go back here and just say grab country code all the way to metro code. And I'm going to go back and edit my query. So this query requires a comma for all the fields, and I'm going to do the same thing here and count them. So there you go. I can run this query, and all it's doing is I first parsed the source IP. I didn't need to do that because remember that those IPs already exist from the field extraction rule, but just for demonstration purposes, I parse the source IP, and then I do a lookup. I specify what I want to look, and then I specify where I want to look at from. And we provide a default. We provide a geo default. I think it's called MindMax, the service that we use. But we provide a service that gives you all that information. You just basically provide us the IP address, and we can provide you all that info. And then I'm just doing a count by all that stuff. So the results for that are just a table that shows you this information. Remember, I just did a lookup. I pull all that information. I've got my latitude, my longitude, country code, country name, region, and all that good stuff. Once you have that information, in particular the latitude and the longitude, it's very easy to use something like a Google map to be able to plot your queries in there. There is a question here from Bahare. The question is, can we get referral spam there too? I'm not sure what you mean with referral spam. Can you expand a little bit on that question? The question again is, can we get referral spam? But I'm not sure what you mean with that. If you can expand, I'd be happy to answer that question. Oh, can you, like a Google bot? Hmm. I'm assuming is this related to the IP addresses themselves? Or are you talking about if you want to do a reference to some other service rather than the geo default? Okay, well, we'll wait for that answer for that question. But um, oh, I see. You want to see the bots that came to the website. So you might want to filter out the bots that are coming to the website. Yes, if that information is in your logs, then you certainly can do that. I don't know how. Let's see. Let me do a quick search here for. Let's just do a quick search to see if that information is part of our log file. So the answer to you is yes, you can filter them out, because if, for example, I'm just going to choose something here. For example, I wanted to filter out anybody who's using Presto 2.8.19. All I would need to do is filter out for that. And then once I filter out only those messages, then I apply the geo lookup so that I'm not so that I'm doing a geo lookup without those messages in my data itself. So to exclude bots and that kind of stuff, that's exactly how you go about doing it. Okay. But I did touch upon another thing. Okay, you're welcome. I did touch upon another thing, which was, what if you want to do a lookup against something else? That is definitely doable. And I didn't have it here as an example, but as you would expect, I'm going to send you to that documentation. Let's say that you had a list of a blacklisted IP address, or you have a list of email addresses or names or something like that you want to do a lookup against. If you load them into Sumo Logic, then obviously you can easily look them up. You can join, or you can do a lookup within Sumo. But I also wanted to point out that if you have data out there in some .csv file or in some .excel file, as long as that file is accessible online, you can do something like this. You could do a lookup, the email address from, and then you specify where that file sits on, and then you'd have to specify which field you wanted to do the pairing on itself. So certainly you can do lookups of other things that are sitting out there as well. Okay, good stuff. Right, so pretty simple here. What if you wanted to exclude, what if you wanted to only show those things that are in the US? As you guys could imagine, all I have to do is a very simple where clause here, where, and if you don't know which fields are available, all you have to do is go to the table view itself, and then you can say where country code equals US. So where country code equals US. And in this case, it's going to filter out only those messages that I want. And you notice now it's only US. If I go to the map itself, it should show me only the map focus on the US, and I'm good to go. Excellent. Good stuff. So geo lookup is always a winner. People really enjoy it and try to play with it. Let me show you the next one here. This one is definitely going to be one of the most used operators in your bag. This one is called the Outlier operator. And let me just show you the picture first, and then we'll go back and talk about how we build it. In this particular case, I care for status code equals 404. So I want to keep an eye on my 404s, or let's say my 500s, whatever the case might be. In this case, it's 404s. And I want to find out, when do I have outliers? When am I having way too many 404s? A count of 404s that I had previously. And that's what this outlier operator is doing in here. So in this, the way to read this graph is the dark blue line in the middle is the data points themselves. So at any given point in time, this is how many 404s I have had. The shaded area around it is the standard deviation. How many two standard deviations in this particular case, that's what threshold means. Two standard deviations around that particular data point. And what the points in pink, or the triangles in pink, are showing me are the cases where I have had a violation, where I happen to be outside of the standard deviation. In this case, I'm above the standard deviation. In this case, I'm below the standard deviation. And you can choose which direction you want to show by this variable, this option here. Direction plus minus says show me all the ones above, or show in the ones below, or only above if I have a plus, or only minus if I have or below if I have a minus. So now you know how to read this. You get the point. The way that this is built, let's make this a little easier. You know how I did all this parsing? I really did not need to do that. The reason for that is because status code is already part of my stuff. So let's clean this up a little bit so that we can just read through the code in here. All right, so I'm saying give me source category equals Apache access. As a matter of fact, I'm going to make it even better for you guys and more performant. The more filtering that you do at the top, the better this is going to be. And the reason for that is because it runs a query, it filters out as much data as it can, and then that data is passed to the next line, and then that is passed on to the next line, and that's passed on to the next line. So the more filtering that you can do at the very top, the more performant your entire query is going to be. Okay, so here you go. I'm saying give me data that has source category equals Apache access and whose status code is 404. So I've limited now the messages to only those with 404. Then I'm doing a time slice of 1 minute. So notice I'm running 60 minutes worth of data, so I'm going to have 60 time slices. And then I'm doing a count of that status code, and I'm calling it server error. So it's just so that I can rename that field, but I could have left it just as a count and then name it count. But in this case, I called it server error, or server error count, I should say. And I'm doing that count by time slice itself. And then on top of that, actually, let me show you the answer for that. So I'm going to go back to the table. Let's just run that first. So here's source category status code. I can do a count of status code as server error count. So all I've done is I've created a count called server error count by time slice, so broken by each second in here. But now if I use this operator called Outlier, what it's going to do is, of course, it's going to calculate that server error count by time slice. But on top of that, it's going to create all these other statistical numbers that are needed for the standard deviation. It's going to create an upper limit, a lower limit. It's going to create an error count. It's going to create the mean. It's going to create the standard deviation. So these are all the fields that it needs in order to be able to show me this data along with some standard deviation. So let's talk a little bit about these options in here. Window means in order to calculate what the standard deviation should be at any point in time, how many data points should I go back to assess that? So if you notice in this large area in here, because it's going back 5 data points to identify what the standard deviation should be, and it found a point that is pretty high, then the threshold, the standard deviation threshold for those remaining points is pretty high itself. Let's change this to, let's say, a 10. You would expect these 2 high points to last a lot longer, right? There you go. So the standard deviation is pretty high because because it goes back 10 data points to find that out. That is why, excuse me, that is why you have 10 data points missing here, because it took 10 data points before it could start giving you the right information out there. All right. So first thing was window. Consecutive means how many outliers should there be before I start alerting you? How many consecutive outliers? Because I have 1, it shows me every single one of them. But if I were to change this to 2, for example, perhaps I won't have any outliers that happen consecutive, and therefore it does not mark them as outliers. Since I said consecutive of 2. Then the next one is threshold. And as I mentioned, threshold is just how many standard deviations. So I could change that to 2, 3, 5, whatever you want your threshold to be. Obviously, the bigger in the number, the bigger the shaded area. And direction is, do I show you the ones above or the ones below? And you get the point. So Outlier for sure is a incredibly useful tool because it allows you to dynamically set thresholds by looking at history and what has happened before. All right, we'll talk a lot more about Outlier as we play with this kind of stuff in here. Any questions so far? No? All right, we'll use Outlier later on to build some alerts to let us know when these pink triangles light up. Let us know, and we'll trigger an alert for that. So I'll come back to that in just a second. Okay, let's talk a little bit about predict. Predict is a very useful operator that allows you, as the name suggests, to predict what is going to happen in the future itself. So essentially, it looks at a line and it looks at what is happening with that particular line, and then it extrapolates what should be happening in the future, and you can specify how many data points in the future you want it to look forward to. I'm going to open this one in particular in documentation because there's a couple of great things around predict that are interesting to know about. So what I showed you there is what we call a simple predict, the ability to take a line. Let's see if I have a diagram here so I can show you that. Not one for simple predict, but it was pretty easy. Essentially, take a line and find out what's going to happen in the future. This one is incredibly useful. For example, if you have a queue and you're removing items from that queue and you want to find out when is that queue going to get down to 0. So my light blue line could be, oscillating, trending down, whereas my blue line would show me exactly where in the future that line would end up hitting the 0 mark, and that's a useful scenario. In this particular case, what I'm doing is I'm just doing a count on the number of messages or the number of requests that actually hit my my web server, my Apache server, and I'm just predicting the kind of requests that I'm going to be getting in the future. All right, that's what we call a simple predict. But we also have predicts that are a little more advanced. So this is the advanced options, and we call that the autoregressive model. Essentially, and you'd have to specify an AR window for it, but essentially what the autoregressive model allows you to do is it allows you to look at cyclical stuff that has happened in the past. Let's say that on weekends you get high spikes in your webs and on your web servers. So it's going to take those into account, and it's going to add them to the prediction of as it's coming in the future itself. So again, here is a model of the simple one. Here's a case where it's coming down to 0 if you have a queue, for example. And then here is a model where, here is a model where you can have that autoregressive looking at patterns that have happened in the past and try to identify those going in the future as well. All right, great. Great. No questions. I'm gonna move on with that one. So I'm gonna close this one here for just a second. LogReduce. I showed you in my example how to use LogReduce. Let me use it again here in this example. I'm going to pull my data, my snort data. This is sort of like network intrusion data that is coming into my environment. And I can see things like detection of a network scan, attempted information leak. So this is just a lot of intrusion data that would be kind of hard to go through it. I mean, it's 1,500 results, and I could eyeball through all of them and try to identify what's going on. Or, as I did before, I could hit that easy button and say, all right, so it looks like I have a lot of scans. It looks like I have a lot of attempted information leaks. Why don't you just categorize those into signatures and just show me? So this is telling me, okay, you had 437 of these. Of course, the IP address might be different. The date is going to be different, but for the most part, it's giving me that information that all of them are going through. Also telling me that I have a lot of web application attacks. Maybe nothing that I have to do with those. When it starts getting a little more interesting is perhaps I want to look at the things that are happening the least. Like in this case, looks like I have an attempted user privilege gain. Maybe that's something I definitely want to take a peek at. So again, what it did is it consolidates all those messages so I can easily sift through them and start identifying stuff. If there is something you do want to take a peek at, like say this one, successful administrator privileges gain, then you can always click on that message. Oh, I have too many tabs open. Let me just close. Which one should I close? Let's close this one here. All right, I can click on any of those. Let's say this one, and it takes me to the message itself. So now I'm looking at the actual message. I can see the date. I can see the actual message, what is happening. I can see the IP address. I can see all that good stuff. What I would want to do from here is I want to know more. What happened right before it? What happened right after it? Who had logged on all this stuff? So I could do really cool stuff like this. I can say, okay, for all my snort data, go and show me the surrounding messages. Show me what happened 1 minute before or 1 minute after, 5 minutes before, 10 minutes before, and 10 minutes after. Or perhaps I don't want to look at all my snort data. I only want to look at my snort data for that particular host. So I can say, okay, show me the data right before and the data right after, that kind of stuff. Looks like I'm having more of that stuff here. So I'm going to close this one. Okay, so but you get the point. I can go and say, yep, show me the surrounding messages for that time period. I chose 5 minutes. It runs the query. Notice that little pink square here. It's showing me that I have 5 minutes of data before and 5 minutes of data after. It's showing me the place. It's showing me page 21 of 43 because that's where my actual message is. But I can now start paging back or forwards, or I could even LogReduce again if I want to, and LogReduce just these 10 minutes worth of data and start looking at that information. So what I'm showing you is the ability to start diving more and more and more by using that easy button. First is aggregate all that data, show me what things are out of the norm, and then start diving in and finding details for that kind of stuff. Questions, concerns, grievances? No? Okay, let me talk about this guy here, log compare. So log compare goes hand in hand with LogReduce. What log compare allows me to do is, okay, run LogReduce now for that time period, but also run LogReduce 24 hours ago or 7 days ago, or perhaps I want some custom time period. And the reason for that is because I want to find out how do the signatures that you find now compared to the signatures you found before. So let me close some of these guys here since I already had a log compare open somewhere in here. Here it is. What this is doing is, in this particular case, I ran it already, and I ran it for 15 minutes. So what this did is it ran 15 minutes worth of snort data. It categorized it into signatures, but it also ran 15 minutes worth of snort data 24 hours ago, and it's comparing the two, and it's telling me, listen, this signature in here is showing up 491 times, which happens to be 4% more than it showed up 24 hours ago. And this one in here is showing up 7% less than it did 4 hours ago. 24 hours ago. And you get the point. I can start seeing which ones are showing a little more, which ones are showing a little less. And it's even showing me, oh, look at these ones. These ones are brand spanking new. This is a case where this successful admin privilege gain is showing 3 times in these 15 minutes, but it did not show at all 24 hours ago. Another use case for this would be, what if I'm trying to squash bugs? I run this, I see things that were there before but are now gone. So in this particular case, this is a log that was showing errors before that is now completely gone. It's not showing there anymore. So just a great way to see what things are new, what things are gone, and then the changes in those logs. And I just added a couple where clause here to show you. Okay, just show me those where is new, and that would just obviously show me the searches of those things that are new. And you could do the same with where delta percentage is greater than a particular value in here as well. So you can play with additional results from your log compare. The last thing I want to show about log compare is not only can you, let me go to custom in here, not only can you do like 24 hours or 7 days, you notice this is 24 hours, you can do custom, which means you can choose some other time period, or you could even choose the same time period. You could even choose the same 15 minutes worth of data, but you could say, let's say that I had a source category that looked like this. I can compare my dev environment against my prod environment and test those out and see how things work out as well. Okay, so in short, log compare and log reduce are some great easy buttons that are going to help you break through a lot of that data and try to identify what's going on. All right, I'm going to go into one that is a little more advanced, but worth talking a little bit about it at least. I have some data that is from my e-commerce site, or this could even be my travel logic data, right? And what I want to find out is, are people moving, like, are they moving in the right direction? Do they go to flights, and then from flights, do they move on to hotels, and then they move on to car hire, and then do they put things in the cart, and after putting things in the cart, do they go to checkout, and after checkout, do they go to confirmation, and all that good stuff. So I want to find out the traffic that is happening in there. By the way, that's just one way of using this transaction operator. What transaction operator allows me to do is it allows me to link things based on, ideally, based on some session ID, based on some maybe some user ID of sorts. But since in my data I did not have an ID, I'm using just IP address. So what I'm doing is actually, before I do that, why don't I take these out just to show you what my data looks like, what my e-commerce data looks like, so that you get a better idea why I needed to build those. Why I needed to build those with statements. Okay, let me just run this. And so this is just showing you my e-commerce data. I parsed out the IP address, which is here, but basically my data is just giving me log lines that say order confirmed, get checkout confirmation 200, verifying credit card, and so on. So it's giving me the URL of what is happening. And what I did is I said, okay, great. So I'm going to use this transaction operator, and I'm going to use that IP address to be the common thing across them. And then I'm going to build some states. And those states, I'm going to say, if you find anything that has the word confirmation, then save that as the state confirmation. So I'm just defining some states. I'm doing the same thing here with order shipped. I'm essentially looking at the URL and identifying what those URLs say, and then using that to then count them from one state to the other. And that is what provides me a view similar to, do I not have any data on this? Let's just run this query. No, that's this one. There we go. And that's what provides me a view like that. So I can see that people went from cart to shipping info, but then not many people went from shipping info onto confirmation and onto order shipped and so on. So just another operator that you can use that allows you to link things from one place to another. Ideally, you would be doing it with a session ID or with a user ID or some sort of unique ID, but you can even use things like IP addresses. All right, so I've shown you quite a few things today. I've shown you quite a few operators that are going to be very, very useful and very meaningful for you as you start building some of this stuff. I have saved them here, so remember that you can always save stuff, pull it back up, run them, search them, and all that good stuff. So what I want to show you now is what if I wanted to start plotting some of this data, or creating those dashboards. In my demo, I showed you how the dashboard was sort of my beginning point, and probably at some point that's what you want to do. So I'm going to take some of the graphics that we created today, and I'm just going to plot them and put them in some dashboards. So the cool thing about these is that you notice there is an easy button here that says Add to Dashboard. So it's as simple as that. I click on Add to Dashboard. That allows me to give it a new title or change the title that it already had. and I can put it in a brand new dashboard just by typing the name. So let me call it the using Sumo dashboard. If I knew how to spell, that'd be a little easier. Using Sumo dashboard, click on add, and it asks me where do you want to save that dashboard. I'm going to put it in that basics folder. Click on add, and as you'd expect, it's going to open a new tab, and I'm going to get a dashboard with just one panel in it. While that one's rendering, why don't we go and add the other ones? I'm going to add the that was the outlier example. Let's oh, that was an outlier example as well. Let me do this one as well. I'm going to add to dashboard, and I'm going to add it to that same dashboard. And while that is going, I'm going to do the same here with a geo lookup as well. Why not? Let's add it to a dashboard and geo lookup, and let's add it to that same using Sumo dashboard. Click on add, and I'm going to add one more since I had it already opened. I'm going to take this quick start search and just say add to dashboard. So you notice how in less than 5 minutes I was able to grab 4 queries that I had out there. I just simply add them to a dashboard, and you can move things around. As a matter of fact, I'll show you now what are the different things you can do to a dashboard itself. The first thing that you'll notice is that I'm in editing mode. I can see who the owner of this dashboard is. Therefore, because it's me, I have the ability to edit them. I can apply some filters. This becomes really, really key when you want to share these dashboards with other folks and you want them to use these dashboards as templates. So for example, let's say that this dashboard was going to be used with different regions. What you could do is you could add region as part of the as part of the filter, or country name or country code, right? So you could say add here, and now maybe let's go add it and say enter your country code, and then give him an example, i.e. UK, right? Save it, and then anybody who is using this dashboard would just come in here and they would enter the value that they need for that particular country code, for their country code, and all the dashboards that have that field as part of it would get reset. You notice how GeoLookup is trying to find any data that it has for Japan, which apparently it doesn't have any data for Japan, but it would get reset to that particular dashboard itself. Or you could always, if you go here and choose panels, you can select and unselect which panels you want that filter to apply to. Of course, country code does not apply to these at all, so that's why it doesn't even give me the option to toggle it on and off. But the ones that it does apply to, you can toggle on and off as you need to. So these filters become very useful when you're going to be sharing this dashboard with other people so that they can use it as a forensics tool itself. Okay, what other things can I do? I can share this dashboard. Right now, this dashboard is by default shared because I put it in a basics folder that was already shared. So it got shared by default. And I can even do some advanced options. Let's say that you have people in your organization that are not allowed to see the Apache Access data, but by clicking this box, they will be able to see that dashboard along with that data itself. All right. What else can I do? I can toggle the theme. I can put it in dark theme, or I can, for your operations center, or I could leave it in that light theme itself. I can add some non-data panels in here. For example, I can add a title, my first dashboard. Or I can also add a text panel itself. These become very important, these text panels, especially because there's times where you might be the one creating the dashboard, but someone else might be reading this dashboard. This data shows, and you can just specify here everything you want. It could even have links to other dashboards as well. Let's say you want them to go to this one, click on add and click submit. So you notice how super quick I was able to build my first, let me just get rid of the filters for a second. I can grab this, I can move it about, I can drag him and just make him bigger, smaller, whatever you want in here. You can start playing with this stuff so that you can move it about. But you get the point. So the key is you have the ability to create data panels. Every data panel has a query behind it, as you saw already, and then these queries themselves, you can just add them here, and the dashboards themselves. If I leave it in this mode, it would require someone to come here and say, oh, I want to refresh this, and let's refresh everything to 60 minutes, or let's refresh everything to 15 minutes. And you notice that all the panels would be running now for the last 15 minutes. So this is what we call the interactive mode. However, if you expect to be putting these panels up on an operations center, then obviously you want them to refresh on a regular basis. So what you do for those is, let me quit editing so that I can show you that. There's this thing called the live mode. With live mode, what if I turn it on? Essentially, this dashboard will refresh itself every 1 or 2 seconds with data as it's coming into Sumo Logic. So just remember, anything that you want to display on large screens, you want to set them in live mode. Everything else, you most likely want to have in this interactive mode that I have here. Last few things are pretty straightforward. I can star it, I can refresh it, I can make it full screen, I can sign out. But if I'm still in edit mode, I can do one more thing that I want to show you. You notice that if I'm in edit mode, I have a little cogwheel next to each panel. That means that I can go and do some more editing. Let's click on this one, and I can change the chart type. Perhaps I want to show a column chart instead of a line chart, or I want to show a pie chart, or you get the point. I can play around with the different types of things I want to do in here, like I could before. I could change the y-axis to be a different range. I can change them. For example, I want to highlight my 404s to be a line chart. Remember that I was showing you that yesterday. So in this case, I changed it. I could change the color itself. So all this is stuff that you saw before that I could do. The one thing, there's two things that I can change here. One is if I go to general, by default, let me save this here. By default, if I click on this thing, it will take me to the query behind it. But if I don't want it to go to the query, but instead I want it to go to another dashboard, that's what I can set here. I can, here, this is an example of how it goes to the query behind it. But let me go back to the dashboard itself. If I want to change that, I can click on this cogwheel, and I can go to general, and then I can say dashboard linking, enable linking to another dashboard, and I can select which dashboard I want it to go to and click on save. And now whenever I click on that dashboard, it's going to go to this, on that panel, it's going to go to this dashboard that I linked here. All right, the last thing I want to show is the query. You notice that the query, I cannot change it in here, and there's a good reason for that. We don't allow you to change the query in the dashboard itself, because you might change it to a query that just does not run, and then you'll have a bad panel in here. Instead, what we force you to do is we force you to actually go to the query itself. Now that I'm on the query itself, I can change it, I can tweak it. Let's say that I didn't care for the 404s, but instead I care for the 200s. I can change that query. And if this is really, really what I want, I can then say update the dashboard. So remember, it's smart enough to know that you came from a dashboard. You can add this query to a brand new dashboard if you want to, or you can add it to the dashboard that you came from. And it says, by the way, your query right now was for this particular time period. Do you want to save it like that, or do you want to save it with the original relative time frame you had before? So I'm going to choose a relative one, click apply, and my dashboard just got refreshed with the new data that is coming in from the new change to my query itself. Okay, so as you saw, the mechanics for dashboards are incredibly simple. It's very easy to create these dashboards. Once you have them set up, you can start sharing them, and everybody can view those dashboards. So the last thing I wanted to cover today was alerts themselves. We talked a little bit about in my example here. Remember that an alert was triggered, which would take me to this particular dashboard, and then I started the whole thing, and my alert happened to be in Slack. Let me show you how to build alerts, and then I'm going to talk about how to make them a lot more meaningful. Building alerts is super easy. As a matter of fact, let's do one starting from here. Here is my, remember that this was 404s. Let's just run this. Here's my query. excuse me, here is my query, and it's showing me the number of 404s that are happening out there. As a matter of fact, let me choose a slightly bigger time frame so that I can hopefully get some outliers out there. Here's my query that is showing me I got an outlier down at the bottom. I was hoping to get an outlier up at the top itself. Let's choose last 3 hours. I want to show you how. Okay, here we go. So in the last 3 hours, I clearly have had some outliers, and those are shown here in the pink triangles. So one of the things that I could do is I could create an alert that just says, if my number of 404s, as a matter of fact, let's go to the data itself. I could create a simple query that says, if my number of errors for this 1 minute time slot is greater than, let's say, 350, then alert me. In that case, I would get an alert for this guy here. I would get an alert for this guy here. I would get an alert for this guy here. So not that interesting. I mean, it's meaningful in that it's identifying the number of alerts. So I could do a where server error count is greater than, what did we say? I think we had said like 350. So in that case, it will show me those scenarios where I would get an alert, and I have a static threshold. Not that interesting, because in reality, it's just telling me you went over this threshold. But if my traffic were to spike, then of course my 404s are going to spike. So not that interesting. Maybe a better one would be using Outlier and letting Outlier tell me when I have a scenario where I have to run this again so that it does it with the outlier that I have in here. So in this case, do let me know when I have a pink triangle, and I'm going to go do something about it. So if you look at the data, every time that there's a pink triangle, that means that in the violation column, I have a 1 somewhere in there. Page 1 of 7. Let me go to the next page. But essentially, I have a 1 in this field when there is a violation. So another way that I could create an alert is say, okay, just show me anytime that I have a violation in there. So where server, I forgot the where statement, where server violation is greater than 0. So in this case, it would let me know. This query would only give me results if the violation is 1, right? So identifying those outliers. Let's look at how to build that alert from here. So I can save my query. One of the first things you have to do to build those alerts is you save the query. Then you go and say, all right, where do you want to save it and all that good stuff. But part of what you have the ability to do when you're saving a query is to schedule that search. So I'm going to schedule that search. Perhaps I want that search to run on an hourly basis, and I want it to pull 60 minutes worth of data. I can specify what time zone I want that search to run on. And then I can say, I want you to send me a notification every time the search is complete, or probably more interesting for all of us here, if a certain condition is met. So in this case, the condition is the number of results. So if the number of results is greater than 0, I should get an alert. Why is that? Because since I have this where clause in my query here, where server error count violation is greater than 0, if I had no outliers, then I'm going to get absolutely no results. We're all good. I don't need to be notified. If I have any outliers, then this is going to be set to 1. The violation is going to be set to 1, and therefore the number of results is going to be greater than 0, and I should be alerted, right? So in this case, my alert condition is where number of results is greater than 0, and I can just say, yep, I want the alert type to be an email. So send it to Mario at Sumo. And I have a few options in here. If I set it to be email, I can play with what I want that email subject to be. I can type it out here, and I can even specify some variables. Where do those variables come from? Here's the help, or you could go to our documentation and see what are the various fields that are available to you. I can send the alert condition. I can even send the number of raw results, the search name, and so on. So I can specify that in here. And then in the email, I can include the query itself. I can include the results in themselves. I can include that histogram. That's that blue histogram that is shown here in the results themselves. And last but not least, I can also include the results as a CSV attachment. Now, this is not meant to be the export function. This is not meant to replace the exporting function. So we really limit these to either 1,000 results or a maximum of 5 megabytes, whichever happens first. If you want to export your results, there's a different mechanism for doing that, and this is not it. So that's why we put those limits in there. But it's as simple as that. Setting up an alert and setting up a trigger is the mechanics for them are super, super simple, as you saw in here, and it's very easy to create that alert. I would just save it, and this alert starts running every 60 minutes. And if that threshold is met, it will email me. Okay? Simple. All right. Before I go, actually, no, let me do that. Let me talk about the various alert types. And then I'm going to come back and talk about meaningful alerts. Rather than just talking about alerts like I showed you, I'll talk about how we can improve this alert that we just built in here. But before I do that, let's talk about the different alert types. All right, so email, you get it. It's pretty straightforward. Script action. Script action actually allows me to create a script and trigger that script when this alert happens. So you notice here, I've built, in my training instance, I've built a couple of scripts. Let's say if a certain query happens and something is going on, I want you to trigger this script that does a little bit of diagnosis in my firewalls. So, or I could restart that Apache server because it's just my dev environment, and I just want to restart that Apache server. So you can create a script. Sumo Logic does not know the content of that script. The only thing that Sumo Logic knows is where that script lives and what is it running on. Is it a Perl script? Is it a Python script? Is it Ruby? Or whatever the case might be. So let me show you how these scripts have been put together. I'm going to cancel out of this, and I'm going to go to the collection screen. Now, setting up these scripts is an administrative function. So if you're not an administrator, you'll have to work with your administrator for that. Let me go to the question tab because there's a couple of questions here that I should resolve. Let's see. Benir is asking, each query created can generate a panel in a dashboard. This is about dashboards themselves. Let's see. Each query created can generate a panel in a dashboard. That's correct. I can correlate all these panels. Example correlation between user login, application code, access on the web server, the network transaction database, create an end-to-end vision. So, Benir, your question is more of a statement, but I'm saying yes. You can yes, that every panel in every panel has a query behind it that goes into a dashboard, and then you can correlate those panels. But even further, you can use something like transaction operators or the join operator, which I didn't even show you today, to correlate data that is between, like, say, user logins or your application or the web servers themselves, or even transactions to the databases. So there's two kind of correlations you can do. You can have things in different panels. Let's see if I have any dashboards here. So I could eyeball and correlate what I'm seeing here to what I'm seeing here, or you could also have queries that pull data from multiple sources, source categories, join that data, and be able to correlate it that way. So just since we're talking about that, let me even show you that join operator so you can see how that could work as well. Sorry that I took a pause from the alerts I was building, and I'll get back in just a second. I just happened to notice this question now. But this join operator allows you to say your search terms here could be where source category equals A, or source category equals B, or source category equals D. So you can be pulling data from 3, 4, 5 different source categories, and then you can do a join, and you can say, all right, run this parse statement, which might work for the source category A. Run this parse statement, which might work for the source category B. Run this parse statement, which might work for the category C. And then you notice how you're creating. It's very similar to your standard SQL join. You can start joining those on a given ID or on a given session ID or or email address or whatever you have that you can join those so you can start correlating your data. All right. That was a good question. Hope that was clear for you guys. Okay, so let's go back to the script action. So again, I was mentioning that this is only for administrators. So if you're not an administrator, you might need someone else to help out. But one of the things that you'll see is for installed collectors, and here's the key: you must have an installed collector because your script needs to sit where an installed collector exists. But if you have an installed collector, you have the ability to either add a new source. Let's say I'm going to be pulling my host metrics or my Apache metrics through the source, or you can add a script action. And let me just go pull one that might already be running in here. Do I have any of these? I have a lot of stuff in here. Well, let's just go and pretend that we're building one. So here's a installed collector. Click on add script action, and what you specify in here is you would give it a name. Let's say Apache restart, for example. You give it a description, and then you'd give it the command itself, how you go about calling this script itself, right? Do I use it using the cmd.exe, or do I call it using Perl, or do I call it using Python, or whatever the case might be? How do I call that command? And then where the script sits. Where does the script sit? What's the path to that script? The last thing that you have the ability to provide is a working directory. And if you do specify a working directory, then Sumo Logic is going to put a JSON formatted file with the results of the alert are going to go in here. So your script could very easily go into that work directory, pull out those results, and do something with them if you want. All right. So again, the script action is the ability to have a script that gets triggered by an alert. Most commonly, we see customers using this when they want to affect some system that happens to be on premise, let's say behind their own firewall. All right, let me go back to the other options that you had in here. So let me do a save as, click on scheduled search, and just choose some random time in here. All right, the other options that you have was ServiceNow. For those of you using ServiceNow, it's a ticketing system like a Jira. We have an integration, a close integration with ServiceNow where we can, when an alert, a Sumo Logic alert can open a ticket, can create an incident ticket in ServiceNow. And then from ServiceNow, you have a link to click back to the query results in here. But if you're not using ServiceNow, then probably this does not make too much difference for you. The last two here are pretty interesting. Webhook, as you can imagine, is the ability to create webhooks and send your alerts to, say, like a Slack or a HipChat or a PagerDuty or even like a Datadog as well. So in this case, I've created a couple of webhooks. I've created connections. I've created a HipChat and a Slack connection. My Slack connection is like this. This is what I defined it as, but I could always customize that payload further if I wanted to in here. And change maybe the name of the bot that I want to send the data with. I'll show you in just a second how to create these connections for your webhook. But before I do that, let me talk about the last one. Save to index is super easy. Save to index is the ability to create a new index or an index name. Let's say I'm going to call it, actually, that's a good one, exception events. Let's say that your query searches for exception events, and then if there is if it finds some events, then it triggers this query. And what you're doing is you're essentially saving the results of your search into a new index. Think of it as a small bucket where you're putting your searches, your results, so you can search them later on. And how would you search them? Basically, you would just go in here in your search and say where index name equals exception events. I'll show in just a second. So two things. I'm going to show you how to search that exception events index, and also I'm going to show you how to create your webhook connections. All right, I'll do the first one, the easy one first. How do you search your indexes? Well, if you were to have an index called exception events, you would just specify it in there. I don't. I've never created that, but if I did, this is exactly how I would do it. And remember, you can do all the filtering and all the same stuff that you could do before. But the other thing that I owe you is how to create those webhook connections. You go to Manage, go to Connections, and you notice here there's the two that I have built, but you can always create a connection by clicking on Add and going in here and creating a HipChat, a PagerDuty, a Slack. Now, the ones that are shown here are just the ones that we've worked with quite a bit, and therefore we get you started. We know what the payload for a Slack connection should look like, so we're just letting you know in here. Or we know what a PagerDuty connection looks like, so we get you started with that payload. But that doesn't mean that you can't connect to other things. Anything that has a REST API, we can connect to. So you just give us the payload that you want it to be, the header, the URL, and test the connection, and if it all works, then that once you built that connection is going to be available to you when you're configuring your alerts. Okay, as simple as that. When you're again, here are the different variables that are available to you when you're building that payload. So if you remember my Slack alert, I was passing it some of these variables that you see here so that I could do something with it. Okay, let me cancel out of this. So the last thing that I owed you was a meaningful alert. But before we go to that, I'm going to show you one last thing that I just realized I skipped, and that is Livetail. For those of you who have not seen it, what Livetail allows me to do is, as the name suggests, it allows me to do a tail on my data. For those of you who are developers and don't even have access to the production environment, look at this. I all of a sudden, through the UI, get access to not only one host that has my Apache web server, but I get access to all the hosts that are running my Apache web server. And I can say, only show me those that have the word, let's say, Mozilla in it. And now it's filtering out only those that are having it. And I can even highlight the word error, or highlight the word Mozilla, or highlight 404, or whatever you want to highlight in your logs. And you can stop it, you can pause it, you can jump to the bottom, you can go up and down this stuff. So just a great tool to be able to see what is happening right now with my logs. You can have multiple of these open, of course. The one thing that you cannot do is you cannot place a Livetail session onto a dashboard. You can have Livetail sessions running on your screen, but you can't necessarily place them into a dashboard itself. You can play a little bit with the preferences. So perhaps you want to change the colors, perhaps you want to change the font size and all that good stuff. So pretty straightforward. But anyway, here's the ability to Livetail the stuff that you are looking for. And then but keep in mind that this is not meant to replace all that search capability that I showed you. This is complementary to it. You can go in here, you can see what is happening now, and as soon as you identify what's going on, you go back. As soon as you want to find more trends over time, you go back to search and you start doing your analytics. The last thing I'm going to say about Livetail is, and I'm going to just show it to you in the docs, is there is a CLI, there is a command line interface for Livetails, which is really handy. You essentially install this thing. You have to just go grab it from GitHub. You're going to have to do an access key to do a handshake and all that good stuff. But once you set it up, you can do stuff like this. I could say Livetail where source category equals Apache access and show me anything that has an error, for example. So similar queries that we've been running. Or you could even do stuff like that. Run Livetail where source category equals Apache access, and you can pipe that, and then you can grep it, and you get the point. You can do all the stuff that you want and even drop it into some output file as well. So this comes in very handy as you're starting to explore your data and you want to get some stuff out through your command line interface. Okay, so I've spoken quite a bit, and I owe you one last thing. And that one last thing that I owe you is, how to create meaningful alerts. So I talked about, we looked at this alert in here, this example, where it was showing me outliers of my 404s. But the problem here is, what if I also had a spike in my traffic? Then this outlier might not be all that meaningful. What it really is a false positive. It's telling me of information that that not necessarily is all that relevant because I had a big spike. So what I want to show you is this other query. Let me just close some of these tabs to clean up the house. I want to show you this one here. This example it's a much more meaningful example when it comes to alerts. I'm going to get rid of the whole parse statement because we now know we have a field extraction rule. So let's walk through it and let's see what it's doing. First is pulling everything that is source categories, time slicing by 1 minute. But then it's saying, okay, if status code, as a matter of fact, I could have said here, status code equals 200 or status code equals 404 because I really only care for those ones, right? So pull me anything that is Apache Access and has a status code of 200 or a status code of 404. So I just care for those. Then I say, all right, if the status code is something like a 200, then set it to a 1 or a 0. Of course, this would be better if I just did if status code equals 200, but I wanted to show you the ability. I wanted to show you the fact that you can use an operator called matches as well. But just just for kicks, we'll do it the right way. If status code equals 404, so what I'm doing here is I'm creating two new fields: a field called success and a field called fails, a variable of success and fails. And this one is going to have a whole bunch of ones and zeros. A one if it's a 200 and a 0 otherwise. A 1 if it's a 404 and a 0 otherwise. Then I'm going to sum those fields. Remember, it was a whole bunch of ones and zeros. If I sum them up, I essentially come up with a count. And if I do the same thing with the fails, if I sum them up, I come up with a count. And I'm summing them by time slice. So now I have a sum of all my fails by time slice and a sum of all my counts by time slice. Now, here's the interesting thing. I divide my fails by my counts so that I get a failure rate. So now what I'm doing is show me count the number of 404s and divide it by the number of 200s that you have. And that really gives me a better view of what is going on, my failure rate. If my failure rate differs, if my failure rate stays constant, then I know that this ratio has been the same. But if this ratio goes nutto, if I'm all of a sudden having a lot more 404s than I have 400s, then my failure rate is going to show it. And that is what I'm going to apply the outlier on. I'm now applying an outlier on the failure rate itself. So this is now really showing me those points where my 404s increased at a higher rate than my 200s. So that is definitely a lot more meaningful. Now I'm not going to get false positives because it's saying traffic is staying constant, but your 404s are going up. So this becomes a much more meaningful alert because I'm now seeing it in the eyes of the context itself. Does that make sense to you guys? An alert that really looks at the context and then applies, and then it looks at the errors within the context of that. So with that in mind, what I wanted to point out now is, and we're coming out here to the end of our session, I want to talk a little bit about this community. I might have talked a little bit about it yesterday, but what I really want to show out is that in this Sumo dojo, in this community, we have in particular a topic called query library, where we've put a lot of these queries themselves. As a matter of fact, if you do a search on Outlier, guess what? You're going to find some queries on outliers and whatnot, but you're also going to find a post on creating meaningful alerts. This is exactly what we just ran through. Right? So similar to these, there's tons of queries here that'll give you a lot of meaningful information on that on templates that you can use. Yes, I'm using it for Apache and status codes in Apache, but this could very well be your Windows events, and these could be the events themselves, and you're trending them over time. So this this area here provides you a lot of templates that you can readily take and use for your other source categories. And the last thing I'm going to say about Sumo Dojo is we also have a Slack channel. I would invite you to join. What this allows you to do is join our Slack channel, and it gets patrolled by our engineers, by our product management, by our customer success team. And if you're part of that, you notice that there's about 500 people on it. We patrol that Slack channel, and we're able to give you answers to some of the questions that you're having, especially as you're getting started and getting your feet wet with this stuff. All right, so that's the end of what I wanted to show you. In particular, we covered today how to look at some of the advanced operators. I think I hope I shine some light on some of the new things that you can do, some of the use cases. We saw how we can create some dashboards, and more importantly, how we can trigger some alerts and create some meaningful alerts to alert some of your data. Any questions from the audience?